house shaken, trees shaken to their roots.
Yeah, okay.
That kind of thing.
It's kind of interesting because I've got a couple of guests, George Hart and Paul Gersio, who head up the Merlin Project, and they look at timelines primarily for the life of individuals, where you are looking for worldly events as well. Somehow you two have to get together. You could have one heck of a partnership here.
We've had a lot of people ask. But I'm not sure we want to go any further with this thing, Cliff. What?
There's all kinds of other ethical and moral issues that come into the realm of being accurate with future viewing. Because, for instance, you can steal the future, and then once people start thinking you actually can predict with accuracy, then they start changing their behavior, and it becomes self-fulfilling.
Well, but are you then saying that we have the ability to change the future?
I don't want to get into the metaphysics because that's a whole nother...
That's a long one.
That's a long one.
That's
but I
show.
follow the idea that, much of our work, and perhaps even maybe the accuracy, is related to the philosophical approach or the fundamental approach of that's been best expressed by Paul LaViolette in his continuous creation series.
Yes, absolutely. How accurate, Cliff, is this program?
Well, it's not the software that matters. That's the issue. Okay, there's about 207 executables involved in any given run, and it produces an IntelliCAD three-dimensional view that's 60 by 60 by 60 units that can house 600 million little dots of various intensities and hues. And thereafter, it becomes the human eye being able to pick out an interesting little clump that didn't exist the last time you did this, and then go back and find out what those words are. Then you're presented with a set of maybe 20,000 words that are all associated with that emotional value. And then you start digging in and rooting around to see why those words showed up at this time, and then you make a guess as to which one of those words to use in the interpretation.
I mean, but somewhere along the lines, accuracy counts.
Yeah.
Who do you address that to? Is it you? Are you the one that we could say,
no,
hey, he's 80% accurate? Maybe you're the cyborg psychic or something like that.
It could be. Igor has difficulty in making the same kind of interpretation. He'll see data clumps as I do, as I pick them out just as well, but he chooses an entirely different set of words that would be less pertinent, for instance, in a particular given situation that actually develops than I do. So it may indeed come down to a personal viewpoint or something. However, we are able to refine as we go along, because when we do get something that we could say, okay, this descriptor set actually contained a bunch of words which showed up in the press to describe something that occurred several months later, such as the Red River flooding, which we got 6 months back or even earlier, in which we specifically said Red River, Mississippi, et cetera, et cetera. And then 2 or 3 years ago, we got this concept of banding of weather. And basically, we've seen those descriptor sets show up in the press. So now we can go back and say, okay, those particular interpretations were accurate, and we can eliminate the other words from that set and refine it a bit. So we're constantly refining the lexicon.
Are all the events that have basically been descriptors, predictors, are they all major events? Are little tiny events ever pop up out of this?
We've done that, and I don't do that anymore because I did it once. You have to understand that there's a certain amount of emotional toll that this takes, because
on who you?
On myself and Igor, because we basically only come up with negative emotions because those are the strong.
Okay.
So this is a not a pleasant thing to do necessarily, nor is your particular worldview enhanced by doing this. We did it once for an individual who was very wealthy before we knew what we were doing, and discovered, without really knowing, and never actually delivered the prediction set because we all discovered it was best to leave it alone. But we discovered about 2 weeks in advance that his wife was going to be killed.
Oh, my God.
And we didn't know. Now, could the future have been changed? I don't know. We never delivered that prediction to him. And we didn't even really see it that particular way. We saw that there were troubles with his long-term blessed marriage, and that it was going to be final. Now, you could have interpreted that as a divorce. In fact, it was not a divorce, but it was a murder. So, who knows, right?
Now, what needed to happen, Cliff, for this to be able to work? The interpretation of the language, the ability to pick up so many things. What was the catalyst to really kick this into high gear?
I would have to say that it was the ability to aggregate vast amounts of data and to juggle it easily with a number of very powerful programming languages. Prolog, for instance.
Proprietary language, I guess, right?
No, Prolog is the one I use comes from Logic Programming Associates out of London. They even have free versions, I believe, you can download. But it's a difficult language to become a master at, and it took me a number of years to get really good at it because it's based on a thing called predicate calculus, which is a different way of thinking about things. Basically, it's a database in RAM inside a computer, and you're juggling the data and looking at it in all these different ways without moving it around a lot.
And George, I would guess, though, the interpretation is also very important here.
Yeah, there are times. I mean, Clif tries to get in his report that he sends out to his subscribers and is kind enough to share with me, he has as good a description as he can do, given the limitations of language and a human to look at the dots and reduce it to words. Now, when I read some of the descriptors, what I come up with are often different visions, if you will, of what that archetype is trying to tell us.
Example?
Northeast power outage.
Okay.
Northeast power outage. Prior to the Northeast power outage, the descriptor set to me was talking about a power plant, and it was around a railroad. Well, that's a pretty good descriptor of what was going on at Niagara during the Northeast power outage. And sometimes, just based on a person's life experience and where they've been and what they feel and so forth, you can get a clearer, I guess, archetype feel for what it's going to be. That's kind of mushy, Clif. What am I trying to say?
We're in a situation where I have a descriptor set that has an emotional value. Now, that descriptor set might include, say, 500 words, of which I might choose 50 as being, I think, the most appropriate and include those in a report. And George Ure might read these and say, in my mind, these 6 stand out.
And then from that, and from the knowledge I might have of geography, power plants, SCADA systems, all the rest of it, because of my personal experience, those words that are falling out of the data set will construct something in my head that will be different than what it might construct in your head, George.
I just love the ability to do this, and I'm sure when we'll get into some of the future descriptors that we can write down, monitor. What about, Clif, timing? How do we know when?
Boy, that's a big issue. That relates to this multidimensional array of emotional values that we've assigned to words, because individual words may have multiple layers of meaning depending on how they're used in a particular context. And so some words, like George was saying, if you're going to get your car jacked, that's got an immediacy value that we figure extends from about 3 days out to 3 weeks, and it sort of like drifts down in potential from there. So we apply these timing clues based on the summation of immediacy, short-term, and long-term values. Now, some words are all immediate. Some words have no duration. Other words, like legal language, are all duration and do not necessarily have any immediacy impact at all. So this is probably very muddied, but basically what we do is we shove all these words into the IntelliCAD, and then we shove in another set, and based on how the little dots shift, then we interpret that as X number of weeks, months, or so on. And we usually do it in terms of a range. Now, we also have a problem. We're doing the data in big batches. So, for instance, say that there's an event pending. If we start seeing it in the immediacy values, we're going to instantly think, aha, it's within the next 3 weeks.
Right.
Not necessarily. As we go further along in the run, we get into the second or third week in the run, and these might take 8 weeks to do a complete series. Then we discover, aha, this event is also building in the short-term values, so therefore it's going to go from 3 weeks out to 3 months. But again, not necessarily, because it might also build when we process the longer-term values. A lot of this has to do with our processing schedule, how we read in the data, and so on, and the fact that we're basically pretty poor. We don't have huge mainframes doing this and large staff rooms.
All right, stay with us. We'll be back with much more on Coast to Coast AM. I'm George North. George Ure, I'm sure you're aware of the Global Consciousness Project, Princeton's work, Dean Radin's work as well.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Your work, along with Clif's, somewhat similar as you tap into the consciousness that is out there around this planet.
Well, by the way, it's mostly Clif's work. I'm just sort of the public face of this.
Okay.
Clif and I.
All right, but your team.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
We are that. The difference, I guess, George, would be this. The Global Consciousness Project is based on the Princeton eggs, and those are recording disturbances in the force, if you will, on a near real-time basis. They have those sensors all over the world. Radin's work, especially his paper Time Reversed Human Perception, which I think is still available on the Boundary Institute website for download, deals with, among other things, people being able to react maybe several seconds in advance of an event. Where we are is we're way out there in front of that. The future seems to come at us, popping the calipause, if you will, and then coming up through the quantum foam, and as it gets closer and closer to us, its language ramifications begin, and as the language ramifications build, you get into that area where like people don't want to get on an airplane before it crashes, an hour, 2 hours,
right,
maybe a few days before. So there's this wave of the future coming at us. And I think what we're looking at is we're way out on the front edge of that building wave before it pops. The Princeton X project is capturing the wave as it breaks into consciousness.
Tell me a little bit about your work with the crash of American 587. Was that not the one that crashed in New York, right? The tail fell off or something like that?
Yeah.
It was supposed that it was what was that? Some kind of destruction due to the wings falling off?
No. I thought it was the stabilizer in the back.
The NTSB report. I read the NTSB report, and it went to the idea that the stops on the rudder were hit repeatedly, and that somehow weakened it. That was a very interesting one, though, because the descriptor set for that had to do with glistening drops of dew on the wings and crash in a marshy area. And
with the three grates that dealt with a drainage situation, that one was really spooky. I found that one very disappointing.
All right, give me the evolution of this one.
Oh boy, Clif, you're probably the best memory on that.
Yeah, this was a long time ago. This one, there was a jumble of events and a bunch of rapid shifts within the model space, as may be expected, following September 11th, and in that immediate few months thereafter, we started picking up something that indicated an airline or an airplane problem, a disaster, and every